Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be talking about the 2026 Senate elections for the first time ever on this channel. We are bringing in the new election season. It's always election season here, by talking about this map for the first time ever. Again, I know 2026 feels like it's a lifetime away, but I remember the first time that I filmed my 2024 Senate prediction. It was like March of 2023. And I actually remember filming my first ever 2022 Senate election, not in 2021, but in December 2020. So believe me, it feels like it's a lifetime away, but I will probably still be making content by the time the 2026 elections are said and done. So we have, a great, 20, 21 months ahead of us, and they're going to fly by. So let's get into it. In that spirit, starting out by filling out our safe Democratic states, I'm going to put, kind of like I say, the usual suspects here. That's going to put Democrats at 40 Senate seats. Republicans do have a bit of a larger number of safe seats. I don't think any of these are really worth debating. Kentucky, I think, could move down to likely if Andy Beshear were to run, but I don't think he's going to run. I think he's likely to run for president. Actually, that's kind of a take that I've been building or thinking about for the past few months. I think Beshear is going to run for president of the United States, not Senate, in his deep red state of Kentucky. So Republicans starting out at a strong 45. We're going to get into the likely Democratic seats now. I think that these are going to be pretty reasonable. And the only one that I'm really interested in at this point is New Hampshire. Again, Minnesota could be close if Democrats run a bad candidate. Virginia could be close if Mark Warner retires and Glenn Youngkin runs, but I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think Youngkin is going to run for president in 2028. And I think that in New Mexico, Republicans could make this closer than people think because Ben Ray Lujan, the incumbent Democrat, is a bit of an underperformer. But with that being said, I don't really see any upsets brewing here. New Jersey is, marking some political changes here. That this is a state that I've had as safe blue for the entirety of my channel's, career. But recognizing the damage that was done to the Democratic coalition here in 2024, I'm going to put it in the likely column. New Hampshire is the only interesting one. Jean Jacquin is 78. She's the incumbent Democrat, and she may retire as she's getting old. She's quite popular. I think if she were to run again, she'd win pretty easily. But Democrats may want her to retire so they can get a new incumbent in during a good year for them. And I think that if she does retire, Democrats will turn to Chris Pappas, who is the representative from the first district of New Hampshire. So he represents half the state. So he's already a familiar face to half the voters here. And Pappas is a good candidate. I think he'd win, but there's just some complications here with Democrats potentially retiring that could lead this falling into competitive territory. So it's just in recognition of that, I'm putting it in likely in the lower end of that. Republicans, this is a good map for them though, and this is what we're going to see is that they've got seats up in enough red states to hold on to the Senate for 2026 at least. Now, Democrats, I think, should aim to get 49 seats, maybe 50 seats on a great night. The path to 51 is hard. The path to 51 for Democrats, and I'll talk about this in another video, is probably going to run through the state of Alaska. Now, that would be on the board if Mary Peltola were to run. Now, Peltola obviously is the House of Representatives member from Alaska who lost in November. In a minor surprise, I'll admit that she was one of the few House seats I got wrong. I had her winning. She ended up losing by about 2% to Nick Begich. But she's popular, and she's going to run for governor more likely. And that might not be of use to Democrats in the Senate, but I think the vision for Peltola is that governorships are easy to win, or are easier to win as a Democrat in Alaska than a Senate or even a House race. So at this point, I do see what she's doing, and I think that she actually could win that governorship. But that means that Democrats are likely to lose the Alaska Senate race without a clear candidate. Of course, it's possible someone emerges. Peltola kind of came out of nowhere and won that House seat. So I think Democrats still have a small chance here. Again, given how Alaska turnout patterns have worked in the past. But at this point, the Republicans are very likely to hold the Senate majority, very likely. And so that makes it clear that Democrats, instead of trying to play for a map that gives them a 5% chance or a 10% chance at 51, they should try for a map that gives them a 22.5 or 33% chance at 50 or a 40% chance of 49, And so that is, to me, what I think Democrats should do. But talking about predictions, I think these are all fairly self-explanatory. Again, states like Montana and Texas would normally be safe, but this is obviously a Democratic-leaning year, you would think. Again, 2022, just a reminder, with Dobbs, with a lot of horrible candidates running, and I don't say horrible like ideologically. That's, as you know, I'm not here to talk about who I would vote for or who I want to win. I'm here to talk about, candidate quality. And Republicans ran some really, really unelectable candidates and got burnt in 2022 as a result of that. And, the backdrop of the Dobbs decision also didn't help. And so, despite that, Republicans still won the House popular vote by 2%, which was actually more than they won it by this year, which was 2024 was also a pretty good year for Republicans. So, certainly, despite everything going wrong for Republicans in 2022, the midterm dynamic of a Biden presidency still made them do well. And the last time Trump was president, Democrats did well broadly in the 2018 midterms. So again, I am expecting this to be a year that is somewhat blue-leaning, bluer than 2022 or 2024. And so whether it's as blue as 2018 or 2020 or 2016, who knows? But I it's more likely than not this is a bluer year than what we've become accustomed to for the past two elections, which have been favorable to Republicans. So with that being said, GOP likely winning the Senate majority, but we have a number of competitive seats on the East Coast that are going to really decide who's going to win come 2028, because come 2028, Republicans are going to have to defend seats in Wisconsin, North Carolina, where Democrats are going to be on the offensive. So let's get into it, shall we? Getting into the lean Democratic seats, I'm actually going to label none of these, so we're going to have to get into lean Republican seats, where the obvious one is Ohio. Now, Ohio, you might be thinking, should be likely. Donald Trump won it by 11%, and Republicans in 2022 won the Senate race here by 6. So what's with the lean? Well, Sherrod Brown, I think, is going to run. Now, there was a report from Axios that he's actually leaning towards not running. I think he's going to run. I think Schumer's going to get him to run, because the only way for Democrats to get to 49 without Peltola in Alaska, and she's, I think, going to run for governor, is Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Now, Sherrod Brown would not, I think, be a favorite. He lost in 2024 by 3% as an incumbent to a relatively weak Republican candidate, Bernie Moreno. And I think 2026 Republicans are going to run someone better than Moreno. Now, on the flip side, Brown, this is a winnable race for Democrats because, again, Brown outran by 8, so he did 8% better than Kamala Harris. Had Kamala Harris lost Ohio by 8%, Brown could have literally won that Senate race, which is crazy to think about. Had Kamala Harris lost it by the amount Biden lost it by in 2020, Brown would have probably won re-election by a couple thousand votes. So, keep that in mind. Brown certainly is still a strong candidate, as he showed in 2024. And in a midterm, there's less polarization. You don't have a candidate at the top of the ticket. Brown's the candidate at the top of the ticket. So this is winnable for Democrats. I think that Brown would start out as an underdog, but I mean this very seriously. Sherrod Brown could win the Senate race. And what we've seen is that in 2024, Democrats held up. And when I say held up, I don't mean they did well, but I mean they held the line with rural white voters to an extent, and with really, I would say white voters everywhere. Ohio is a very white state. Kamala Harris did 3% worse than Joe Biden here, but that was while she did 6% worse than Biden in the country, and she actually made some meaningful gains in the suburbs of Columbus and Cincinnati. Ohio, in the right circumstances, could be close for Democrats if the midterm turns out to be bluer. But for now, it's going to be in the lean Republican column. Now, the next state that's going to be in the lean Republican column is Maine. Maine is interesting. This is a blue state. Kamala Harris won it by 7.5, but Susan Collins is the GOP incumbent. Now, for those of you who watched me in 2020, which, if you're still here, awesome. Please, comment down, if you've been watching me since 2020. You will know I was very wrong with this race in 2020, as was everyone, even Red Eagle Politics. If you go watch that, his final Senate prediction, everyone thought Susan Collins was going to lose this race. She won re-election by 8%. It was, I think, the most shocking Senate race that I have watched since I started paying attention to politics in 2018, or really paying attention to Senate races in 2018. Susan Collins is a Republican senator who votes pretty reliably with the Republicans. She will vote against the Republicans sometimes, but she is a reliable Republican vote in a blue state. She is the Republican equivalent of Jon Tester or of Sherrod Brown, right, prior to 2024. And so Democrats really want to knock her off because she is a Republican in a blue state, in a state that otherwise is pretty reliably Democratic. And so Democrats are, this is that they have to win this seat. To win the Senate majority back in 2028, they have to win Maine, right? And so ultimately, there's no question in my mind that they're going to go after Susan Collins. And in 2020, it didn't work. In 2020, Democrats thought they were going to win, and they lost decisively. So the question is, who's going to do it for Democrats? If they don't really have a clear answer to that question, Jared Golden might run. He's a candidate, but he actually, I think, wouldn't run against Susan Collins. So Democrats might hope to get a local legislator or potentially Janet Mills, who's the governor, to run. But I don't think that any Democrat started as a favorite against Collins. Again, Collins won by 8 in 2020 against Sarah Gideon, who I thought was a pretty good candidate. And again, that was in a presidential year. This is a midterm year, which could be a bluer year, sure. But in a presidential year where Biden won the state by 9%, you would have expected Collins to go down. So out of sheer respect for her strength as a force of nature in Maine, as I think one of the most impressive Senate performances in recent memory, she will start it as a favorite. Now, if the polls start showing her down, and if we start getting credible information that could show her being unpopular with Maine voters, yeah, potentially would go in the blue column. But for now, she will start as a favorite. So the three toss-ups at this point are Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia, and they're all different. So we're just going to go through them. Michigan, I'm going to put in the tilt Democratic column. Again, this is a state that has swung back and forth. In 2020, Biden won it by 3. In 2022, Democrats did really well here, with Gretchen Whitmer winning by 11. But in 2024, as you all will know, it was a disaster for Democrats. They lost a House seat, and they only narrowly won the Senate race. They only won it by 0.3%. And Alexis didn't even get 49% of the vote, so it was not a decisive victory by any means. And Kamala Harris lost the state by a full 1.5. So Michigan got redder. The good news for Democrats is that they tend to do well here in midterms. Dating back to 2014, Democrats have won like every statewide race in Michigan, or not every, but every federal statewide race in Michigan in the midterms. And in 2022, they did really well. So the coalition, I think, for Democrats is going to hold up in the midterms. The question is who the candidate is. If it's Pete Buttigieg, I think Democrats lose. If it's anyone else, barring a scandal, I think Democrats would start out as favorites. The issue Republicans have is that they don't have a great bench here either. Again, they don't really have a candidate the way they do in other states that I think could make you go, oh, wow, this is, a game changer. I think they're going to run Mike Rogers again. Rogers is he's mediocre. I think he's good enough to win if it's against Buttigieg, but I don't think that he would change the race enough to be a clear favorite against someone like Dana Nessel. So for now, Michigan Democrats, I think, start out as favorites. It's also a midterm year. Again, you might just get things swinging back. Michigan was roughly exactly in line with the national popular vote in 2024. So if we get even a D+3 year, which wouldn't even be that big of a wave, you'd expect Democrats to win this race by around 3, all else equal. So again, Michigan is still in 2024 is not that red of a state, and I think that it's going to be favoring for Democrats to start out this cycle. Now, I talked a lot about how there is not a candidate in my mind that I think would immediately flip back a race or change a race's trajectory. And I think in Georgia, Republicans have that in Brian Kemp. So Brian Kemp is the current governor, and he won by 8% in 2022. And everyone is saying that he's for sure going to run and is for sure going to, win this race. Now, I actually contest the notion that Kemp is a lock to run. I think he's going to run, by the way. I think he has a 60 to 70% chance of running. But these things are often assumed to be true when they're not. In 2022, everyone thought Chris Sununu was going to run for Senate in New Hampshire, and he did not run. Brian Kemp, I think, has been a local political figure in Georgia for Republicans for many decades. He might want to translate that into federal office. He might not. So to me, at this point in time, I think he will run, but it's not a guarantee. With that being said, I'm going to start this race out as tilt Democratic. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be mad at me for this, but I do think that Brian Kemp is a little overrated. Again, he won by 8 in 2022, which was impressive given the fact that, Raphael Warnock won by 3 in the runoff and actually won the election day vote in November by 1, so he ran 9 points ahead of Herschel Walker. But Walker was a bad candidate, and so was Stacey Abrams, who ran against Kemp in his governor race. I think that all things considered, winning by 8 against a bad candidate like Abrams in a pretty good year for Georgia Republicans, right? Like they won the House popular vote by 6 or 7. Kemp's good. I don't think he's amazing, but I think he's good. Ossoff, on the other hand, beat out a relatively well-liked incumbent senator, David Perdue, in 2020. I think he is a figure with good political instincts. I think he'd run a better campaign than Kemp, even though Kemp might be like a more formidable challenger. So I think that if you're actually starting this race out between Ossoff and Kemp, I'd rather be Ossoff by like the slimmest of margins. But there's also a chance Kemp doesn't run, in which case I'd rather be Ossoff by a good amount. I think it's lean Democratic without Kemp running. I think it's a toss-up with Kemp running. But again, early on, start with the incumbent, and Ossoff, to me, is a strong incumbent. Now, North Carolina, this is going to be kind of the reverse of this. I'm going to put this in the tilt Republican column for the same reason. Everyone seems to think Roy Cooper is guaranteed to run, and everyone seems to think that he's going to beat Thom Tillis. Now, Roy Cooper obviously is the incumbent governor of North Carolina. He's popular, sure, but mind you, his win in 2020 was not crazy impressive, right? He only won by 5 against a relatively weak, underfunded GOP opponent, the same way that I think Kemp's win in 2022 was good, but not like crazy impressive. And again, everyone in 2020 said Thom Tillis was going to lose. He ended up winning, right? And Thom Tillis is one of those senators that has won close races before. He did it in 2014. He did it in 2020. I think he can do it again. He's the incumbent, and, I don't see a reason to start him out as the underdog. And again, we're not sure that Roy Cooper is going to run. I do think he will run, like Kemp in Georgia, but it's not a guarantee. So all those things make me want to start this race out in a Republican shade. So what does that mean? Nothing flips per my current prediction. There's chances for Democrats in North Carolina, Maine, Ohio. Republicans have, a good chance at Michigan and Georgia. For now, I'm going to stick with the incumbents. So a relatively anticlimactic end, but I think this would be a pretty bad result for Democrats, all things considered. Yes, they'd hold on to key seats in Michigan and Georgia, but they need to win. I think for Democrats to call this a success, they have to win these 2 Senate seats, because in 2028, then they'll have a chance of winning it back. But at this point, I think that this is the most likely outcome, just based on what we know right now. But as always, feel free to challenge me in the comments down below. I do respond to productive comments. But please don't call me stupid. It'll really hurt my feelings. Just kidding. So with that, thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.